Attack on Titan did what no series ever could. The initial wave of anime coming to the West was spearheaded by Dragon Ball, and while it did have a massive impact on the youth culture of that era, at the time and in the years that followed, anything that were to even look like it was then put in the same category as being for kids, or it was labelled as weird.
What? You're fucking hard!
Anyway, this was a stigma that continued to stick for years upon years after that initial introduction into Western markets. Now, all of those stigmas still stuck around for years after. Now, that was until back in 2013, when Attack on Titan came smashing in and absolutely took over. Take your hand-drawn Naruto filler episodes, run to your basement and hide. Because Attack on Titan was here and was making a mark as one of the first anime to really turn up and break boundaries. And over the course of that initial season, it fed people this addictive narrative and dealt out more realism per episode than any of its rivals ever did. These massive CGI scenes and animation, and more fanfiction than you could dream of. And this really just all came together to make the perfect package, bringing more eyes to the scene than any other series had done before it, helping change what the conventional consensus was on anime, and signify the start of a new era. Oh, the thing is though, if you'd followed the manga back when it started in 2010 and looked at the art style, you would not have been wrong for thinking that it looked empty, lifeless or basic. If you were to take it and compare it to the works of other famous mangaka, that it was almost beginner level. You would not have thought that this single series would go on to become one of the most anticipated and game-changing titles ever. I mean, Levi alone has more fans than most series put together. Now, while first impressions back in 2010 may not have been amazing, the evolution in detail and quality over the past 11 years has been astounding. I mean, not quite Berserk levels of quality, but with some of the fights that are drawn later on really making each movement stand out, and making the impact of each of them just come to life so much more. Now, with the end of the series on the horizon, I want you to take a look with me at why it has succeeded, the radical changes in the story over the past few years, and just how much of a modern classic this is. So make sure to like, comment and subscribe, because I need the ego boost, and I also make anime and manga content. Now, early on, the series establishes something that most others do not. Realism. Realism in this world is rooted in humans inherently being more fragile than a fucking egg, where we mostly see anime resort to last minute power-ups, continuous plot armor, and children that cause more damage than a fucking wrecking ball. However, in the world of Attack on Titan, you knew that the chances were if you were to venture outside of the walls that you would die.
He dies.
And while many will say that there was too much of a reliance on shock factor early on, just take 2 seconds to look at the world that they're living in. It is shock factor when you compare it to other shonen, where death is just a quick time event. But here it is merely the cruelty of the world that they live in. Isayama doesn't rob the viewer of grieving for a character only to bait and switch and say, nah, not today, mate. Now, one of the things that Isayama has done so well in this series has been in his foreshadowing, or through the inclusion of these tiny, insignificant details that turn out to hold so much more weight later on in the series. There are plenty of examples of these sort of points dotted throughout the early stages of the story, that really, only the most insanely eagle-eyed of viewers would have been able to piece together at that time, with the impact of these only coming to light further on in the story, with the biggest and most game-changing of these being that little secret that lies between one Bertolt Hoover and Raina Braun. Now, if we were to slowly look back at the early stages of the story and go over certain chapters in particular, what we will begin to find is that there are many points in this story where we see Annie, Raina and Bertolt just in the distance, talking. Nothing really all that crazy. But with the limited amount of dialogue that we do get to catch, it just comes off as strange and makes the characters seem so far away and disassociated from everything that's going on around them. However, with what we later go on to learn, it all comes tumbling down to leave the reader and both viewer in shock. However, there were plenty of hints along the way. Annie, Raina and Bertolt's reaction to seeing Titan Eren for the very first time. Or when Raina just happens to escape from any script that had already killed so many scouts beforehand. Or later in the castle arc where Raina and Bertolt constantly promise each other that they will get to see their hometown again. Now, all of these things individually, most people would deem as unimportant, meaningless, or just plain old plot armor. But when that big reveal happens, you are left wondering of how you never came to realize it yourself. You truly get the feeling that this isn't your run-of-the-mill storyline. There is writing and plot points being set up from the beginning that all have meaning and all pay off. Another similar situation we see that does this brilliantly is the relationship between both Eren and Floch that later comes to light in the story. Yeah, Floch, you know that guy from the end of season 3 that had hair? that had hair, more hair than screen time? Well, he's in Aaron's group of besties now and has his own fandom to boot. We see Flock going from hating Aaron to being more dedicated than a Twitch simp. And we never really had a reason for the switch. Well, they actually really both like killing people, so that's probably it. But how is there foreshadowing in this? Flock's actions following the time skip all indicate that something must have happened with Aaron. And while it may not be as much of a
Holy shit, look at the reveal!
it is a nice way of revealing these unseen changes that occurred in a character over the course of the story. Everything in this story has a purpose and nothing just happens in order to keep the wheel spinning. This helps to deliver a much better narrative over time and there is nothing that just happened. Which helps to ensure that when there are reveals later on in the story, that the viewer has a plethora of evidence and support for what is happening. There will always be evidence that a consumer can take and piece together to help them figure out what is going on. Either as the story plays out or upon learning about this and looking back and seeing all the pieces fit together. Now, what makes Attack on Titan unique is that it goes on to draw from multiple genres as it develops, never really identifying itself as one clear thing. My Hero Academia is about superheroes, One Piece is about adventure, Demon Slayer is about incest.
Nani?
Attack on Titan had started out as an end of the world scenario, that then evolves into a massive geopolitical battle, yet still holds on to that original theme of trying not to get eaten. What had looked like a generic shonen with our unhinged protagonist and smart side character began to tackle real issues, and before we knew it we were in the midst of a story about genocide and the persecution of a cultural minority. Only for a time skip and a parachuting mass murdering jump into the Marley arc is it that we actually get to see the world from another perspective for the very first time. Everything that we had known about life inside of the walls is still real and is still valid. But what we do see is just how far ahead the rest of the world is. We begin to see why Zeke, Rhina and co have been the aggressive force so far. The rest of the world for centuries had been dominated by the Titans and had been suffering much the same fate as we had seen in the early parts of the series. So much so that once the king that controlled all of the Titans retreated behind the walls, the rest of the world came to realize that shit, it's way too dangerous that weapons like that even exist in the first place. But hey, if we collect them all, we can start fucking up shit ourselves. Throughout this change in perspective, you really get to see that the word villain is heavily volatile in this series, and really can be branded upon either side in the story. People who were once villains are now shown in a different light, and you begin to realize how equally fucked up their own existence has also been, with a major consensus of the fanbase doing a full 180 on Rhina, to now where people mostly sympathize for that character, realizing that he is merely the product of his own environment, and only did what he had to survive and to protect everyone that he cares for, just as Eren does. Rhina's own struggles are then echoed later in Falco, and as a result becomes one of the reasons Rhina continues to fight. And for me, this really pushes the narrative and makes me care for each and every single character in the story so much more than if this side was never shown. Each of these new characters are built up in a short space of time, but the story manages to convey each and every one of their personalities very well, and ensure that going into the latter stages of the story that there is some sort of a connection to them. We get to see just how messed up their country is. We see it enforce racism in its society. We see that it brainwashes children into hating their own people. We see Piek with that. But really, the change in perspective in seeing the existence of life outside of the fishbowl we had once known, being able to learn about why they do what they do, kind of makes you come to think, are they inherently evil? Everyone but Zeke. You snitch. Even if you had the series follow Rhina from the start rather than Eren, you're going to come to the same conclusion. Just who is doing the right thing? Is it Rhina trying to eliminate threat, albeit while causing massive harm to innocent people? Or is it Eren who is just trying to protect his home and ensure that people live peacefully? The more we see both Eren and Rhina, the more we begin to realize that they are more similar than anything that was presented to us earlier in this series would have suggested. Here we have two boys with massive daddy issues and a messed up childhood, as well as having a tendency to break through walls and scream too much. How both Eren and Rhina mirror each other's actions at different stages in their lives truly is a testament to how similar they are. That relentless drive we see in Rhina as a child we later see in Eren. Eren who then goes so far to ensure that his goals and his ideals are achieved. With both characters realizing the levels of destruction that they have both caused and both accepting that it had to be done. Only for it to later come to light that Rhina is deeply suffering from the acts that he has committed and just wanting to die. While Eren on the other hand has travelled down a path where he can only see one option. A path that we later come to learn was the only path that he could take in order to create his new world. And not a new world in the sense of an 80s movie villain with an ego, but a new world where people come to realize that the history of a single person did not dictate everything about that group of people. A world where he has to take the necessary and character-defining steps in order for it to truly become a better place as quickly as possible. And while many argue that his morals seem to have shifted toward that of a villain, he now seems morally grey. At the root of it all, he still just wants to protect those that he loves, and ensure that everyone can live on through his sacrifice. He does not want any of his friends to inherit his curse, as he realizes that it would not only cause rift in the group, but also severely shorten their lives. He knows that only he and he alone can complete this. While having a deep-rooted hatred for those that have done him wrong, he is not completely clouded in anger. He is able to recognize that amongst evil that there is good. That there are those that are in a similar position to what him, Mikasa, Armin and everyone else had been in, even if they do get curb stomped later on. This does however cause a massive conflict of interest, as while we see how this group of people are just trying to get on with their lives, the second we see them in conflict with our OGs or islanders, just like any fight, you immediately try to choose what side you're on. You know who you want to come out on top, but conversely, you are also in a way rooting for the other side, hoping that they survive. The entire change in perspective and everything that came with it took it from a series where you wanted to see what happened next, you wanted your team to win. While those elements still hold on, more than ever we just want to see who will be free from the pain first.
NANI?!
Side characters play a massive part in the story, with most of them resolving their own challenges and struggles that they face, with all of these characters having gone through some degree of growth that's taken them to new heights, and has also built up their roles in the story so much more and expands on them brilliantly. Sean stopped hesitating in the moment and becomes more decisive. Connie realized he can't fix his family. Ryan found a reason to keep on living. But when it comes to Armin, it feels that his role in the story has only ever been to keep it moving forward. That as a character he's just a generic smart boy anime stereotype. But that's all he ever was. And while he has shown how selfless that he is, it doesn't feel like that it's something that is outside of what his character would do. And while he does cause destruction as the Colossal lead the scouts and continue to fight, everything that he does is reactionary, which isn't exactly any different to the character that he was when Eren was eaten in season 1. He just happens to be the one that Levi saved as everyone had suffered too much. He becomes commander not by succeeding but through sacrifice. It still feels that he is the same scared and nervous character as he started out being. But I guess that could be his saving grace? That while being overwhelmed and terrified, he's still able to think in those situations, where he had seemed to become more clinical in his decision making. Now he just seems to revert back to what he was, where Armin inherits the most monstrous of titans. The dark side that some of us thought might have emerged as it had in Eren never actually fully presented itself, even completely retreating and vanishing. And while it isn't necessary that a character has to go through so much development at a certain stage in order to legitimize them, it just feels that when there had been so much potential in Armin, that ultimately it just feels like it goes to waste. The end of Attack on Titan is a strange one, because while it has been a massive series and made waves when the anime first released, it seemed to be a series that would be hard to match in terms of popularity at least. But since then, there have been other series that have come along and actually eclipsed the levels of hype and popularity that Attack on Titan once had. And it's not just once, but right now there seems to be a clear line of new titles that are either exploding or being lined up to be the next big thing. Demon Slayer's explosion since 2019 has seen it become one of the most recognized titles of all time. More and more unconventional and darker take on shonen are also showing up and staking their claim. Jujutsu Kaisen is going from strength to strength in its anime. And for anyone that knows where that manga goes, Chainsaw Man is Chainsaw Man. It looks like it could flip the entire industry on its head. And while there also have been other big shonen around right now, Attack on Titan and Demon Slayer are the best examples to show this. That right now, if you want your favorite manga to go on and become an even bigger series from its anime adaptation, having an anime isn't enough anymore. To have a series really make waves in the industry now, you need a series to be picked up and meticulously crafted by people who are heavily interested in the manga and are able to make sure it gets what it deserves. What is happening is that the outlier that Attack on Titan was seems to be coming more and more often than they once had. But so far, while most of these new titles have only had moments, there hasn't been any of that nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat, anxiety-inducing feeling that came with every season of Attack on Titan. It still feels that while there are newer titles that have massive hype and popularity behind them, there are some aspects that Attack on Titan can just do better. Be it the mystery, the world building, the people in that world. Everything in Attack on Titan, just like any other series, has to end.
エレン、どうして泣いてるの？